Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at these new French destroyers again, as I've played them a lot more and had some very good and some very bad games with them. Here's a great example of making a massive mistake and getting massively punished. We lost our engine and 3 of our Torp tube launchers there. So, to get out of range of this Carl Johan, which was entirely my fault for just being proxy spotted, we're going to get punished pretty hard. So I used a damage control to get my engine back, instantly lit on a fire again that relights us, engine knocked out again instantly, rudder gone, 2 more Torp tubes gone. Okay, still spotted though, thanks to that fire. Again, totally my mistake for getting spotted initially. Another Torp tube gone. And I think this next one, yeah, permanently Torp tube gone. And finally, we should go undetected, losing about 14,000 HP as well. These things get punished hard for misplays. It is very difficult to play these things at times. There's massive strengths here as well. Torpedoes, for example, doing insane levels of damage and going pretty quickly as well. And you don't have too bad of a reload on them either. So this ship is a very decent torpedo boat. The guns aren't bad either, as we've already seen. But yeah, you can get punished incredibly hard. And that's really what this video is going to be about, is just my general thoughts on this ship and the line overall. Since we're getting them in early access, I should be a little bit more clear now that I know more of the full picture. These ships are getting changed as the update goes live, so very difficult to understand, at least in the time I had to get these ships exactly right. I do apologize for that. I should work a little bit harder on that. But the Tier 7 is actually in the Battle Pass paid line, as well as you get the Sirocco at Tier 5 as well in the paid line. That is in the Battle Pass there. And in the free side of it, you can get the Tier 5. And then there's going to be some other stuff in the armory, of course, for more doubloons. With these ships being torpedo boats, I found myself almost always playing them as a gunboat. And that really comes down to the way World of Warships is played these days. After honestly struggling with them for about 3 hours in a row, I had a bit of a bad time, but I figured out why. These ships are very interesting to me. I really like the design. I think they're very cool, that they're very close range focused torpedo boats that have decent guns and situationally very good speed. They can survive based off of French saturation as well as that speed, and very good concealment, 6.1 kilometers here with the Cassard. It's just the meta is totally not built for them. That's really what it comes down to. Playing these as a torp boat, any torp boats really these days need to be also gunboats, and primarily gunboats. You're not going to get good opportunities to launch torpedoes at people at these closer ranges unless it's the late game where people suddenly decide to start pushing. As we all know, this meta is rather passive these days. So with these new French DDs being rather focused on punishing people for pushing in, yeah, it can be a bit of a struggle. I found myself needing to gunboat and fight destroyers a lot of the time to gain any sort of ground, to get close enough to these battleships to do any sort of torpedo damage. Unless they all decide to push one flank. I had a game or two like that where I got incredible amounts of damage. But otherwise, I found myself rather useless early on unless I was willing to go in with these guns, which are decent, but our DPM isn't anything terribly exceptional. And since we have some French guns here, they actually do have decent fire chance. The ballistics are slightly better than Marceau's. Not as good as Kleber's, though, on these 127s. So they're okay. Not what I want to be playing this ship as, though. I really want to play it as that torpedo boat role. Turning the wrong way in this one, we run into the Holland again. And we're going to be lucky if we can even escape this alive. HE damage, not too bad, though, as we can see. And yeah, we're going to take a lot of damage. There goes our engine again. A lot comes down to keeping that engine boost up for these very stressful situations where you get into trouble and then your engine gets knocked out rather quickly. I guess it's on me for damage controlling so early in this one. Damage control to fire, I believe, which was a mistake. So not playing these things perfectly, but you can see how punishing it is if you're not playing exactly perfect. with them. And this game was actually before the first clip I showed you, so I learned my lesson, right? Waited till my engine was knocked out. And then it got knocked out again right away. Feels bad. But this game is a great example. We got a few torp hits here. Nice to finish off the Musashi. But really, we're gunboating. We're fighting destroyers. We're needing to deal with them, or we're trying to farm battleships. All right, those were torpedo boats, though. I ran the Torp build in those ones, because anytime I ran the gun build, which this one is going to be the full gun build, I took range even with AFT on the commander. You can see we have Fearless Brawler as well. This is going to be the most DPM you can get out of these guns. I felt like I was misplaying a lot of the time, even though I actually got pretty good damage here. If you want to play a gunboat version of this ship, why don't you just go play Kleber with better arcs and more speed? Or a Marceau, or any other of the amazing gunboats in this game, right? That's kind of what it comes down to for me, and why I want to play this as a Torp boat more often, and yet wasn't really able to. It's really a privileged thing, though, to be honest with you, because I have all these tier 10s, so I can just say, yeah, I should just go play a Marceau or a Kleber or any of the other gunboats because I have them. Obviously, if you only have this ship or a small number of ships, then yeah, wanting to play a gunboat can make sense, but then changing your commander builds over is very expensive. So it's difficult to know. I did play down to the tier 8 as well. We looked at the tier 9 yesterday, of course. And at tier 8, it's very much a gunboat. The torpedoes reload rather slowly, and as we go down in the tiers, they become more gunboats, in my opinion, just because the torpedoes really fall off in their minimum damage, where the tier 10 doesn't really feel like it does. We're going to land a ton of torps through this gap and do a lot of damage here with the minimum damage values, keep in mind. So that's where the tier 10 power creep comes in, I suppose. Power creep's probably not the right word. But anytime a new line's introduced, let's be honest here, we're always checking for what's the reason to go free XP to the tier 10, right? Compared to the tier 9 or tier 8. What makes those mid-tier ones not fun to grind while the tier 10 is very strong? And with this ship, I do believe it's the minimum damage on the torpedoes. It does a lot. Where at mid-tiers, it certainly does not. And it still has good damage at its closest range, but they're a little more balanced, in my opinion, where they do fall off rather sharply towards the end of their damage values. In fact, they even become some of the lowest alpha damage torps at their tiers, or towards the bottom at their tiers when they're mid-tier. Whereas Cassard still retains very strong minimum damage values. That's nice 85k there, with some gun power, of course, but again, launching some more torpedoes. So I think the proper way to play this in random battles does feel like a gun build, but it's just disappointing. I said that this ship really doesn't feel like it fits the meta. I'm very interested in these closer range engagements, obviously. I really enjoy brawling as a battleship. Knife fighting is a DD, close range torpedoes that just absolutely crush people. Very interesting to me. But the meta's not really crafted around that. I was talking about that a little bit at the end of my stream, where I thought that this ship is so cool, but it's in a meta that Wargaming's crafted for the last 5-8 years that doesn't really support it. It's a one-off ship that loves this close range action, and it's stuck in a game that is designed to be played at longer ranges. And that's unfortunate. It makes this ship quite difficult to play. It makes it feel like it doesn't quite fit. And with this update, I'm very excited. We do actually have the mode shuffle game mode coming in, and that's going to include things like airship escort, convoy, and then I think it's a reworked version of arms race as well. So maybe we're going to get more close range action in that. I hope so. One of the reasons I think people didn't push in as much when some of these game modes were introduced into random battles, I think it's because people didn't set up their ships to push in. I don't know for sure, but that was some of the complaints I saw in just the general community with airship escort being in random battles back a few patches ago now, was that they couldn't decide, or they couldn't pick the ship that would be best suited to that mode, and then they were stuck with a long-range ship because, of course, random battles, you played a long-range ship. So maybe with this mode, people will go into it expecting to brawl and expecting to push, and maybe Cassard will be very, very fun there. I hope so, but I haven't played it there yet, unfortunately. We're still doing great damage here. Cheeky little fire there is actually going to finish off that Yamato. And what happens if we run into a submarine? Well, we're so slow, we're actually just not going to catch this guy. Yeah, a little disappointing, but that is the reality of Cassard. I have actually tried it with a Swift and Silence Torp build, and that helped a lot with the speed and getting around the map. But then I felt rather useless because I've invested literally nothing into the guns. So then we are very much at a disadvantage anytime we're trying to fight any destroyers for map control. It's challenging. It's very challenging. And I think that's going to be the way a lot of these ships in this line feel. They're going to feel very much like they don't quite fit in to the current metagame. And maybe this is a trend shift. Maybe this is the start of different ships. But I'm not so sure that that's the way Wargaming will go. More torp hits, very nice. Notice the overpens on the main superstructure here. More overpens than pens, actually. The AP actually has very, very slow shell arming time. It's double or maybe more, triple what normal destroyers have at this tier. I think it's 0.03 seconds. I can actually check that real quick here. And it means you're going to overpen a lot. And we are here. Cassard has 0.03 second arming time. Whereas, I mean, even Shimakaze has 0.01. And Kleber has 0.025. Elbing even has 0.025. And some of the best ones, of course, have 0.005, like a Daring or a Druid with that short fuse AP. So it means that the Cassard is going to overpen with its AP a lot. And it means you want to be shooting HE most often. It doesn't even have good pen either. At 12 kilometers, you get like 57 mil pen, and Kleber would get like 110 at that range. So, yeah, it's really, really not the best AP. So I would definitely recommend sticking to the high explosive, and don't even try and do the cheeky AP into broadside destroyers thing with this, because it's just not going to arm. Even still, I tend to not recommend that unless you're in like maybe a Daring or something with that really short fuse AP. But even then, the time it takes you to swap shells, you're reducing your DPM, they angle slightly. There's all sorts of ways that it actually reduces your DPM, so I often am just sticking with HE a lot of the time into destroyers. Unless they really, I notice they're going to stay broadside for a while. Otherwise, I will stick with the HE just for that consistent DPM. Just as a quick aside there. This Azaccio in smoke, actually, is going to just chunk us. So when you're healthy, when you have a lot of HP at the beginning of the game, that French saturation doesn't work quite yet. So pretty big hits there from that Azaccio. Props to him for using his guns very well here. And not quite able to finish off this Yu Yang. The dispersion is DD dispersion, but I did find myself sometimes just dealing with shells landing short, shells going on either side of a ship. And yet it's DD dispersion, so fun thing to deal with there. Maybe it's just the gel velocity or something. I don't know. We're definitely missing here at this range, though, but that's just a general thought that I had while playing this thing. So overall, I think the tier 10 is interesting, but very hard to play and doesn't really fit into the meta. But it will be available 2 months' time for everyone. It's early access here, unfortunately. So it's going to be very expensive to get a lot of these ships early. As always, I will just recommend you wait the 2 months and then grind these ships out for free. And by then, maybe I'll have a better idea of how to play them. Maybe I'm playing them wrong. It is still early days, of course, and as a gunboat, it can work. Maybe I really just need to fully invest in the gunboat and say the torps are a nice extra value add here. But then I feel kind of bad because my DPM is so much lower than a lot of the other tier 10 gunboats at this tier. So then I'm at a bit of a disadvantage there too. And your speed is just so bad in comparison to other destroyers without this speed boost up. So you do have to save it for those primary engagements, I think, that you're wanting to take. And something like Swift and Silence, 4 points to take out of this build, very difficult to do in my opinion. This poor Wisconsin real quick here. Torpedoes, max range, don't do much damage unless they detonate someone with 60,000 HP. a very fun mechanic there, Wargaming. I'm so glad it's still in the game after all these years. You gotta pay 100,000 credits or near enough to not deal with that every match. A great way to keep new players from experiencing the fun and or just not having any credits ever. Not a fan of detonations, but it does help our damage look a little bit better into this one. A few more torps into the Colombo there. It's really scary to have this ship on a flank, I gotta say. Especially if it's a little bit low on health with some adrenaline rush. It's pretty scary torpedoes. I still think they're quite good, but having played it more without the smoke, without a heal, and in games where a carrier comes over and spots you, you don't have the best AA to deal with that, and a ship that really does need to be on a flank, in my opinion, to use its torpedoes. It's tough, man. It's really tough to play it into today's tier 10s. It does do a lot of spotting damage, though. Something I noticed, just since you do not have a smoke, you don't have really any incentive to not be spotting. So the spotting team damage you can do like that is rather useful for your teammates, I think, overall. I guess the last thing to consider is, should you YOLO with this thing? That's a question I had a little bit while playing it on stream as well. I think no. I think if you're going to YOLO someone, you do it with a Kleber, because this ship really relies on its engine booster speed and doesn't even get that much speed relative to Kleber with this engine boost even. And as we've seen, and as I've experienced, this ship loses modules very quickly. Very squishy modules on this ship. Engine, rudder, torp tubes, they get knocked out very quickly. So if you're going to YOLO rush people, I think it's going to go poorly. Even though you do have French saturation that can help you stay alive as you get to lower HP values, I still think this is the way you want to do it. Typically, you want to wait for people to push around islands at closer ranges like this, and then just torp them from these closer ranges. And the torps do massive damage, of course. But you also have that 6.1 kilometer detect and torps that go almost 80 knots with the full build. I think it's 79 knots. And that's very little reaction time for people. Even if I miss aim here, I assumed the Freddy would actually slow down and turn in to try and dodge the torps. That's why I aimed where I did. No, he just goes in a straight line. So I mis-aimed for him to go in a straight line, and yet the torps are so fast, we still clip him with one and manage to get the kill there. I've had some good games, as you've seen in this video. Some very, very good games with the Cassard, but I won't lie, it's been a little challenging. It was pretty frustrating a lot of the time too, when I had those games where I just couldn't use this ship to its strengths of its torpedoes, and I was forced into that more gunboat map control role, which it can do, but I would rather, again, just play a different gunboat destroyer for that. So I've just been sitting here in port, kind of wondering why I'm not as excited about this ship as a gunboat compared to a Marceau or Kleber or any of the others, just after recording that earlier part of the video. And I think it comes down to a couple things. The gun angles is something I didn't talk about as much in this video, but that is something very important here that we got to give like 40 degrees of broadside to actually shoot all three guns. Like, it should be 2/3 or 3/4 of a Marceau with better shell arcs. Retaining French saturation, lower speed obviously is a big problem here as well, but I mean, we kind of clown on things like Kurfürst with its its turret angles all the time. So I guess it would make sense that a destroyer with those turret angles that also wants to maybe use its guns would be a little bit cumbersome to play, especially one that's not very quick all the time. The other thing I'm considering is the HP pool. It's not a big difference, but 24,000 up to 26,000, or near enough 26,000. It's nearly 2,000 HP difference. The speed difference here, combined with the better turret angles, probably allows Marceau to get away with a lot more with its HP pool. Kleber, certainly with its massive shell velocity advantage, allows it to gunboat a lot easier. But then Cassard has way better torpedo power, right? The torps do just so much more damage. Even at their minimum, doing just about 17,000 damage. I mean, that's pretty close. That's like 1.5k off of Kleber's damage. And Marceau, I believe, deals less damage than that with a much longer reload and worse range and worse speed. Like, it's a way, way better torp boat. And that's why I want to play it as such. And yet the gun power feels so awkward. Certainly the lower tiers have even worse firing angles, so maybe that's one of the balancing factors. It's taken me a while to kind of figure that out, actually. It just hasn't felt comfortable. It just hasn't felt comfortable in that gunboat role, even with the very good concealment, situationally great speed, 3/4 of a Marceau gun power wise. I guess it has to come down to those turret angles, I suppose. I don't know. I'll play with it some more, of course, but that is my thoughts on this ship. I still think they're very interesting, these gunboats. Sorry, these Torp boats. Getting it mixed up. Just kind of a hybrid build here. I did try the Fearless Brawler stuff with extra range. I did try the Swift and Silence Torp build. Those felt too compromised, one or the other, even though my best damage game did come with the gun build, so maybe I'm just wrong there. And yet a lot of the damage still came from the Torps in that game. Like, I don't know. Very, very weird set of ships here that we got in the game. I think at the end of the day, it really just doesn't mesh with this passive meta quite so well. A ship that needs to play at closer ranges, that has poor firing angles, that shows a lot of broadside, so it can take a lot of damage. You don't have good AA, you don't have a smoke screen to hide from carriers, so you got to be very careful of those. You don't always have the speed to go after subs, so that's quite difficult. It's hard to play. I think that's really what it comes down to. I kind of got that early on, that these are hard to play, but really why, I think, comes down to just how situational the speed and maneuverability is, and these poor firing angles are just very difficult to use. But that's going to do it for today. Early access is coming, so if you do decide to whale it, let me know what you think, and if not, wait a couple months and give these a try. They're very interesting. They're very, very interesting. They're not some boring, bland new line that doesn't really add anything. It certainly adds a very interesting element to the game, which I like a lot. And it's a close range element, which I also like a lot. Just very hard to play in random battles with that close range element these days. So thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.